Journeys Ahead, Beyond Trilogy, Part 2, Chapter 5, No Hero. Written and narrated by T.S. ProArt. On Matira's name, will you two just go away? The female spark shouted in rage as Void and T awkwardly followed from behind. For the last few minutes, the two of them called but fumbled behind the female spark, just trying to plead for her aid. However, she wasn't having any of it. In fact, she felt more irritated than she had before. Lady, can you please just let me explain this better? Begging like this is bothering me more than it's probably bothering you. Void asked as T tiredly walked from behind. Then do my metal ass a favor and go back from where you came. You can easily just find many other versions of yourself that aren't me. She called back with an angered look over her shoulder towards the two Voids who appeared tired. Ma'am, with all due respect, my friend here has been searching for an opportunity such as this for a long time now. Could you at least hear him out before doing anything else? We've traveled far just for you. T asked, causing the female spark's horns to flare with a pink and frosty anger. Clearly! Now travel back! How many times do I gotta tell you to just leave? Go! I don't want any part in this! This is not my problem! The pink spark exclaimed with a turn and point at the two who had been following her. Please, I know we have no right to just barge in like this, but there could be more dangerous versions of myself that would just drive us further into an endless goose chase. Just, please. Void pleaded again, starting to lose a sense of hope to his words. Also, it's just a really long walk back. T added, leaving the female spark to glare in a freezing annoyance. And here's my... Are you two serious? What is this? A desperate father and his drunk grandpa? You two are like the start to one bad joke. She stated, leaving Void to then scrunch his face with a twinge of anger. Well, guess what? We beat you, so that makes you the punchline. Void retorted, only to get suddenly lunged upon and pinned to a tree by the woman's strong force. Whoa, hey, easy, he was just joking. T exclaimed as his horns began to glow blue, while the female spark pressed her elbow in the Void's neck, pinning him against the tree with a stern stare. Listen to me and listen real close, pal. I understand what it's like to grieve over some personal shit. And I learned the hard way that sometimes it's best to just let things go instead of leaving them to fester. She barked, with ice particles flying from her mouth. Sometimes we can't just bring back what we lost, no matter how hard we try. So either leave me to my own or just go find another worthless version of yourself. Because I am not the one you need. Locking his blue eyes with her green and white irises, Void could see the slight hint of tears welling within the corners. Upon realizing this, he was instantly able to read her emotions. The tension in her face, the holding back of sobs. She wasn't just being mean for the sake of being mean. There was something more going on within her head. Dropping his own tense stare, Void carefully reached a hand forwards, and then just simply rested it upon the right side of her face. Blinking in confusion, the other spark glanced down to this gesture and cringed, unsure of what her variant was doing. Yet, it was then Void asked something that completely threw her off emotion-wise. Is everything okay? Blinking in silence, the female spark let go of Void, stood back, and just glared at his now sitting form upon the snow. What? She asked as a flare of annoyance returned to her heart. Are you okay? Void asked again, while slowly standing back up. Am I okay? The hell is that supposed to mean? Are you trying to flip my emotions or some shit to get your way? She questioned, while Void raised his hands up in a defensive manner. No, your face, Void stated as the two reflections locked eyes. I know that expression. I know it well. Void continued, leaving his female counterpart to just glare in a confused gaze. Is everything okay? He asked again, as T strolled back up. What's it to you? What does it matter? Just get out of my sight before I freeze you down like the other things. She explained with a less threatening tone that was now replaced by a baffled sense. Because I have a problem with wanting to help people, I guess. Plus, I just don't like seeing others angry. It's not good for the brain. Void stated as they all began to walk again, now however in a closer line as opposed to being spaced apart. Oh, how noble. Not like that's going to get me to change my point. She went on before stopping and looking over her shoulder, now with a dry and empty stare. Listen, I'm sorry about your kid, but I'm not the reflection you need. Just go back and find someone else. I'm not worth the time. There's plenty of actual hero voids out there who'd be up to the call. The cloak spark rationalized, before just quietly trudging onwards. Well, by some twist of fate, friend, the mirror space we shattered open led us right to you. Now, I'm not sure how spiritual you are, but I believe fate has brought us here for a reason. T stated, causing the female spark to stop mid-stride again. I gave up on faith a long time ago, old man. Materia can rot in the shades for all I care. Just, please go away. Aren't we not supposed to be in the same area anyways? The cloak spark asked, recalling upon the older stories from her elders. Only when our loved ones are on the line. That necklace you're wearing, do you have a Jida too? Void questioned, causing the spark to whirl with an offended look to her face that glimmered with burning pink eyes. Did you just ask if I have a... She boomed, before suddenly falling silent to the calls of the woodland monsters. Looking around themselves, the three voids glanced upon the forest that they had been residing within, started to realize that the sun had begun to dim. Shit! The female spark said, as she deployed a mouthguard over the lower half of her face. Rising up from its exposed half appeared a green turquoise visor that then shifted into a rounded helmet looking akin to something that a skier would wear. This is why I wanted you to leave. Now the Wendigos are coming out. She explained while opening her arm hatch and pulling out 3 items that suddenly transformed into snowboards. You stubborn idiots. Now I'm going to have to watch over you guys for the rest of the night. Hurry, get on these things. Exclaimed the spark as she tossed the 2 extra boards to Void and T. Whoa. Alright. Void replied as he and T stood upon the 2 blue boards that alerted with a tracking light. Don't fall off, because I'm not turning around if you do. The pink spark stated as she opened her thruster from behind her back and began to blast forwards, taking both Void and T with her. As the blue boards trailed behind, it left the other 2 voids wondering on where they were exactly heading towards, while the monsters continued to scream from the woodland afar. Clacking both flint and steel together, the female void created a little fire for her other 2 variants, as they now sat within an old wooden hut. This little refuge, that was the female spark's home, was boarded up by the windows and doors, designed with specialized cybernetic barriers that had all been clearly designed by the spark herself. There. Now you 2 won't freeze to death on my floor. She muttered with an irritated tone to her voice, as both Void and T sat around the fire, which was oddly in the center of the room in a little pit. Thank you, lass. I was getting rather cold. T thanked as he unhooked his axe, heated it up, and rested it beside the flames, giving it an extra boost for heat. Yeah, thank you, Void added as he created a small flow of electricity that coursed through his body for extra warmth. Grumbling and sitting across from the other two Voids, the girl eyed them down while resting within her cloak, having a tired stare for all to see. Okay, since I'm stuck with you two for the rest of the night, I guess I'll listen to what you have to say. It's not like you wouldn't take the chance anyways. The spark stated, as she activated her sword to poke and prod at the fire. Oh, well, before I jump into it, let's actually introduce ourselves first this time. You know, without the war cries and bloodshed. Void stated, as both him and his female variant locked eyes. The name's Void. Void Novason. He introduced, with a smile and hand to his chest. And I'm Void the Matterbirth, but you can just call me T. The other Void greeted, leaving the pink one to raise an eyebrow. Why T? She asked. Reaching up, T adjusted his hat with a little tilt before replying. Teacup. See? He said with a smirk. Ah. The girl Spark replied before looking back at the fire. And you are? Void then asked, with a hand outstretched. Vivian. Vivian Celeste's daughter. She revealed, after having held her tongue for a long moment when asked. Vivian. That's a wonderful name. It is a pleasure to meet you. T replied with a grin, while Void just nodded. Thanks. Care to get on with it? Vivian asked, as she leaned back with her elbows upon the floor in a laid-back manner. Adjusting himself, Void tapped his chest and projected an image of Jay, all in his happy and carefree glory for Vivian to see. Alright. My son was born with abilities that go beyond our natural reach. Me and my wife Jida are... Flinching with a small pink flare, Vivian's eyes flashed as she suddenly went stiff, caught her breath, and then relaxed once again. Vivian, are you okay? Void asked. Nodding, the pink spark just gestured with her hand towards Void, to just continue on without even saying a word. Well, as I was saying, me and my wife, we're from different realities. Hence our son was born with powers that no one else is meant to have, as well as being a part of a genetic structure that I've dubbed as glitched. Void went on as he changed the hologram image to Lotus and his army. In the past, these monsters destroyed my world, their beings born out of the errors in reality. But with the help of my Jida, we thought to have stopped them for good. But their King Lotus, he was beaten and turned into an artifact. An artifact that we stupidly held on to. Void went on before Vivian spoke up. Let me take a guess. Your son somehow managed to awaken the king and in turn got himself stuck in the BS world above. She speculated, leaving Void the blink in surprise. I mean, that's kind of the gist, actually. Void stated as he projected a hologram of Jay's last moments, showing Vivian how he had trapped both Lotus as well as himself into the great beyond. This happened 2 years ago, and during that time, me, Jida, and the rest of my family have been searching for a way to break through and bring him home. Hence why we're here now, asking for your help. Void sadly elaborated as Vivian watched the clip in its depressing glory. Her stern and annoyed face had even softened to a slight and remorseful stare as the rift closed, being accompanied by the shaky cam and screams of Void and his family. I've been slipping. I don't know how else to describe it. This book, this spell between reflections, this is our last hope. Void sadly revealed to Vivian while raising Odin's book up. But now with my adrenaline gone, it's clear to me now that you have no interest in any of this. If it means anything, we'll leave at sunrise. Void said as he pocketed the book, closed the hologram, and sat in a huddled position. I just want to get him home, you know? For a long moment, Vivian just stared into the fire, watching as the flames fizzled and shimmered in an elegant light. Within, the gears of her brain began to slowly turn and shift with conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny that she did in fact feel bad for the spark, but the past memories from her own life troubled her soul so deeply that it almost felt impossible to agree and help. Look, I'm sorry about Jay, but I'm not the spark reflection you want for this. Unlike you two, I'm no hero. Vivian replied as she glanced up towards the two voids. Now, what makes you say that, hon? T asked as he took off his hat and leaned back on his elbows. Blinking and turning her head away, Vivian winced with a defeated huff before explaining her mind. Look, I'm not sure if I've made it obvious, but my road has been pretty damn bumpy. Except those bumps were spiked mountains that I dive bombed into. Vivian stated as she gestured to her scarred over face and arm. Listen, all you need to know is that everywhere I go, I either leave a wake of problems or disasters. No matter what I do, I end up making things worse. Not just for myself, but for those around me. Those who are still here, that is. Vivian softly finished as her face fell to a sorrowful gaze. Looking down, she reached up and held the blue necklace that looked to shimmer with an icy power within. For a long moment, T and Void stared at the spark across from them. Although subtle, it was clear that Vivian was holding a lot more baggage than she wanted to admit. Whoever the necklace's owner was, it was clear that they had been gone for a long while, and perhaps alongside some others in her life. Maybe that's why her home was in such a hostile place. Maybe Vivian just wanted to flee from her life, and just disappear altogether. These were thoughts that Void once had several times over in the past, along with T, leaving them ever more concerned for their reflection, who was shadowed with an angered persona. If you don't mind me asking, what were they like? Void inquired as he tilted his head to the side. What? Vivian asked with a stern stare back forwards. What were they like? The one who owned the necklace before you. Void asked again as he gestured towards the blue aura in Vivian's hand. What's it to you? She inquired as her horns began to gently frost over. To help ease your stress. Talking about things can release tension. But again, only if you want to. Void answered, leaving Vivian in a sudden silence. Looking back down to the necklace that wasn't actually hers, she took in a long breath, then began to recall better times, happier times. She was everything one could ask for. Vivian surprisingly began as she closed her eyes in remembrance. A real nerd. Funny. Talkative. Someone who would listen even if it was for the dumbest thing. Chida. My sweet Frost. Vivian muttered, with just the hint of a smile, before it returned back to a dour state. No. Never mind. That's not a story I'm willing to tell. Not to you two, no less. Vivian croaked, before glaring towards Void and T. Listen. Come tomorrow morning, I want you two out of here. I'm sorry, but this isn't my thing. Not anymore. Again, I'm sorry. Vivian boasted, before getting up and marching over to a bed near the corner. Sighing, Void nodded his head and leaned back upon the floor, with T doing the same at his side. We understand. Thanks for listening, at least. That means more than you probably think. Laying down on her bed, Vivian just stared up at the ceiling as memories from her distant past began to circulate. Memories that she had tried to bury, but ones that would never be fully sealed. Well, I'm glad I could give you something besides a spine injury, she replied while closing her eyes. And Void, as I said from before, just know that sometimes we can't bring back what's been lost. Vivian reinstated as Void just blankly stared up at the cracked wooden roof. I understand that you want to save your son, but there's always a chance that the spell you showed me is just hocus pocus. If it is, promise me you won't tear yourself up over it. Vivian asked, leaving Void to stare in silence. Minus our fight, you seem like a good guy, Novason. It also seems that you have a family that needs you. So if it falls flat, promise to not let go of what you have, because some of us have nothing at all. Vivian finished with conflicted thoughts, as Void remained silent with his own. Of course. He weakly replied, as the deafening silence of sleep took hold of all their bodies. As this happened, Vivian just continued to think. Her mind raced back and forth between right and wrong. Was it right for her to do such a thing, to discard them like that? Or perhaps, would it be best if she were to try? This is all her mind thought, as every single thought in her head bounced back and forth like a conflicted ball in a tennis game. Cracking open his eyes, Void was greeted to the sight of gentle morning yellow lights shimmering in through the roof above, alongside a cold breeze going down the side of his face. However, there was one extra thing that was before his vision, a glowing aura that was moving. As his eyes adjusted, the spark could now see the hologram of Jay's sacrifice above him, being played on loop. What the? Void asked as he looked down to his glowing chest and then to the side, seeing Vivian resting against the wall and watching it intently with her miscolored eyes. Vivian? What the hell are you doing? Void asked as he awkwardly raised the morning hand up to his chest and turned off the projection, while T just snored with his hat over his eyes. Why were you? Void continued to ask, before suddenly being cut off. Your son. You seem to love him very much. Vivian stated with a stern but thoughtful stare. I apologize, but I've been looking through your memory banks for the last 5 hours. The female spark revealed, causing Void to shoot up with a disturbed look in his eyes. You... what? Why would you... he asked, before being cut off again. It was to make sure I wasn't getting my leg pulled or murdered in my sleep. I had to know whether or not to put a bullet in your head. Trust me, I've had my fair share of bad reflection encounters. Vivian revealed to Void's surprise as she went on. But through my nervous act, I've come to see a lot of the memories you have of him, as well as your family. Well... Vivian went on as she fully stood back to her feet. You seem so... happy. Jay, he looked innocent, full of life and wonder to his eyes. It almost reminds me of a long time ago, a time where I myself was, well... Vivian went on before reaching her normal hand down for Void to take. Look, I know I may have been rather harsh last night, but after a lot of thinking, I've come to realize that, minus the 50-50 probability of it even working out, there is in fact still a chance of you getting to live out a happy ending. And I can't be a selfish asshole and ruin that chance for you. With stunned eyes, Void reached up and took hold of his reflection's palm, and was then swiftly hoisted back to his feet. With their mitts interlocked, Vivian gripped it with a sibling-like bond that left Void taken aback by her sudden change in attitude. Listen close, Nova-san. There's a part of me that really doesn't want to do this. But to be honest, I still don't know if I even have the strength to try. But I've come to see a lot of my past self in you from those old memories. Vivian explained as she then projected her own purple holograms of what she saw. Jay learning to ride a bike, Void's entire family enjoying time at a carnival, even down to Jay's first day of life, being a little blueberry wrapped up in Sarv's scarf. The last thing I truly and honestly want to see in this life is another version of myself walking this barren omniverse in self-hatred. Vivian revealed as she looked away with a burning set of terrible memories. I've made mistakes, Nova-san. Left a road of trouble that has led me to isolate myself in this dangerous world. But perhaps T is right. I don't know if it's fate or what, but I've been longing for some type of second chance. Something to prove myself that I'm not a walking disaster. Vivian expressed with a depressing tone before looking back with a glistening stare. I know I don't deserve to ask such a hypocritical question after being such a bigot towards you both. But would you be willing to let me stand by your side to help and at least try to rescue the boy? She asked, causing Void's eyes to spark in a positive blue shade. Yes! Yes, of course, yes! Thank you! Tears might, thank you! Void exclaimed with a sudden wave of glee as he then lunged forwards and embraced Vivian as an instinctual reaction. Gasping with an embarrassed wince, Vivian was at first reluctant about the sudden embrace, but then gently returned the gesture, finding an odd sense of comfort to it after a short few moments. I didn't know you were a hugger, she awkwardly said, while gently tapping Void's back with her mechanical claw. Sorry. Just kinda how I react nowadays. Dad stuff, you know? Void replied with a smile and pulled back, however, now feeling the sensation of Vivian's hands atop his shoulders. Even so, if this doesn't work, you gotta keep that promise I asked of you last night. 'Cause unlike me, Vivian stated in a tense tone as she reached down and held up her wintry blue necklace. You still have someone to fight for. Never, ever forget that. She demanded with a look of seasoned eyes that screamed over 1,000 silent words. Of course. Is all Void replied with as the two stood back from one another, having their cloaks flowing in the gentle breeze. So, you really changed your mind because of invading my privacy? Void asked with a curious stare while crossing his arms. Not just because of that. After getting the whole scope last night, a part of my soul was telling me to do what was right. But every time I try to help, it always makes things worse. Vivian reinstated from her banter while crossing her arms and looking down. I isolated myself in these woods of hell because of that. I had no one to turn to, No one who wanted to be around me. I failed my loved ones. I failed everyone. And the world shunned me for it. When you two randomly showed up, I was reacting on instinct. I apologize for any injuries I caused, as well as harsh words. Vivian apologized with a dour look before perking up, the T's hand resting over her right shoulder. Life is full of light and darkness, but never should one side take over the other. You need not to explain any more of your troubles, friend. We understand the pain of loss and failure, but you don't have to deal with it alone. Not anymore. Looking over her shoulder, Vivian stared in the T's eyes as a wave of emotions began to course through her soul. Emotions she was fearful of showing. Emotions that once led to so many troubles down the road. Is it wrong to be thankful after last night? She asked, while T just raised his arms up. Is it wrong to ask for a hug of newfound friendship? Snorting, Vivian cracked the tiniest of smiles before raising an eyebrow in response. What? She asked, as T gestured for her to join him by the fingers. Come on, you know you want to. The Matterberth beckoned with the tone of a funny older brother that left Vivian a tad baffled from the kindness presented. After some hesitation, she fully turned, took a breath, and gently walked in the T's arms, only to then feel them wrap back around her in a warm embrace. Slowly, Vivian raised her own arms up and carefully wrapped them back around T, all while Void just smiled at the scene. See, isn't this nice? The Matterberth asked, as Vivian closed her eyes and softly pressed herself upon T's body, looking akin to a little kid who was hugging their parent for the first time in years. Yeah, it is, she said, looking to almost fall asleep. As Void watched the wholesome scene play out, he was almost tempted to join in. It was like seeing two long-lost siblings make amends. It was truly a sight to behold. Yet, before he could, they all suddenly halted as something shot through the side of the wall. All turning, the three Voids locked their eyes upon a spherical spiked object that was now lodged into the floor, beeping with a flashing purple light. What the? Vivian asked, as the beeping and flashing suddenly got louder and faster. Once the pitch reached its max, all three Voids suddenly realized what it was. It was a bomb. Privateer! Awakening and pushing himself up from the snow, Void both wheezed and blinked the frost away from his eyes as he then took in the blurry sight from around himself. The little hut that Vivian had called home was now shattered apart, turned to rubble and purple flames from the bomb that had gone off. Morning winter mist blew itself down from the light above, making things all the harder to see from afar. What the actual... Vivian groaned as she stood up from the snow, now having the ends of her cloak smoldering in dying flames. Ow. That was ow there. T mumbled as he sat up and rubbed the back of his head. God damn. You two okay? Void asked, as everyone fully stood to their feet, but finding that most of their systems had been jammed. Portal openers down. Weapons deactivated. We've been crashed! T exclaimed in worry as both Vivian and Void looked to their arms. Pulling up their HUDs, they were in fact infected with a temporary malware virus that seemed to halt most of their tech for a good few minutes, including portal travel. What just happened? Vivian asked as she checked her frost arm, seeing that it was one of the only few devices that were still functional. We were hit. Something like that. T explained as he and the other two reflections grouped up. By what? Void inquired, only to then receive his answer. Whirling their sphere-shaped heads, Void along with T and Vivian looked on towards the wintry wall behind them, as the eerie and near sound of a whistle's song sang out from the depths of the frigid cold. With one slow step and then another, the mysterious whistleblower appeared, leaving Void and T tense with shock, but Vivian in both concern and curiosity. Now, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3. How perfect. It was the hunter, the fallen Void. He had found them. This guy again? Void barked as both him and T took a step back. Huh? Who is that? A reflection? Vivian asked with her own backward step as she gazed upon the approaching and towering force of nature. Indeed, he's a real sweetheart, T answered as he reached for his axe and gripped it tightly within both hands. With a low cackle, the fallen Matterburf swayed themselves to the side and contorted their right hand into a large blaster that suddenly began to charge and hum with energy. Knowing that they couldn't beat him from the last time, along with being unable to portal away, Void shouted the only thing he could think of to do in that moment. Run! Kneeling down, the fallen Void took aim and unleashed a barrage blast from what was now revealed to be a turret gun from his arm. As glowing bolts of flaming purple launched forwards, the three Voids turned on their heels and began to sprint away, being unsure of what to do. Whizzing past their heads, the bullets struck into the trees, shattering apart both the ice as well as their trunks, leading to several tree falls around the escaping trio. Matira's might! What the hell is up with him? Vivian asked as she quickly whirled around with a leap and sprayed an ice wall behind their fleeing souls. We didn't do anything! He just so happens to be on some random-ass hunt! Hunt for us of all people! Void rapidly explained as the three leapt forwards and slid down an icy hill. When Void came to my world, that guy appeared the morning after. We fought, lost, and thought we had lost him yesterday. But it appears not. T shouted as they landed and continued to sprint through the winter horrorland. And you're telling me this now? Vivian shouted with a stern eye. We didn't think you were going to tag along! Void shouted back with a concerned look as a purple explosion erupted off to their sides. Cool thought process, little brother! You are still in my world! Vivian cried as the three leapt forwards again as another explosion erupted from behind. Sorry! Both T and Void said upon landing back to the ground. We gotta find a way back around to the portal, T stated as the three of them now ran and evaded forestry side by side. That would require for us to sprint for an hour backwards, and it just so happens that Mr. Ray of Sunshine is, oh yeah, behind us! Void retorted in a slight panic as Vivian glared to her left. Beside us! He's beside us! She suddenly revealed, causing Void and T to look leftwards. Within the tree line to their side, the siblings could all see the faint and shadowed outline of the monstrous reflection sprinting alongside them in a powerful stride. The way his arms were swinging, the thumping and pulsations from his sharp legs. It was animalistic, primal, and terrifying. Rearing their arm around, the hunter began to open fire once again with malicious intent. Raising her golden frostbiter again, Vivian created a frost shield that took the brunt of the blows. As she did this, the trio quickly leapt downwards again, heading into a lower sector between two land inclines, while the shadow continued to run upwards. Looking up, the three of them could see the monster now leaping from left to right, from both higher landmasses above, looking akin to a leaping fox that was hot on its prey's tail. Jesus! This dude's insane! Void exclaimed as he used his natural magic and summoned forth a Nova Rune upwards, striking the phantom spark away for the time being. No shit! T replied as the trio exited the slanted landmasses and back into the woods. You guys' portals ready yet, or are you still broken hard drives? Vivian asked as the shadow rolled down the hill and entered back into a nearby sprint. No, we're still down. Just keep moving. Void called as the shadow now rushed upon their right-hand side, glaring upon them with a burning and purple eye. Vivian, freeze this! T shouted with a Nova Rune summoned to his hand. Realizing what the plan was, she nodded, cocked her arm, and aimed around Void's running form. Igniting its golden canister, the female spark blasted T's rune, turning it into a frozen star. Before implosion, the Matterbirth gripped it tightly, rolled around, and sent it smashing into the fallen Matterbirth. With a sapphire eruption, the beast was thrown away for the time being, leaving the trio to continue onwards with their escape. However, as they left, all they heard was the distant cackling and heartbeat from the beast behind. After running for a few more tensed-up minutes, the trio also only slid to a stop upon arriving at a steep and frosted ledge. Looking down, they could all see that they had arrived upon a mountainside that stretched a long way down to another sector of the forest below. That too went off down into another steep cliff. Mizira's might! Void gasped as a sense of his old fear of heights returned in full swing. Damn it! Dead end! T exclaimed with worry as he looked over his shoulder at the darkened woods behind himself. Not exactly, old man. This is probably our ticket to safety. Vivian exclaimed with a positive reaction before opening her arm hatch and throwing out her 3 snowboards. You can't be serious. Void replied with a hint of worry to his voice as both Vivian and T stood upon their colored tops. What? You afraid of heights or something, little boy? Vivian intensely questioned as she deployed her battle helmet. Partially. I just don't know how to snowboard. Void replied as the loud thumps of the hunter approached from behind. Well, best to learn than never, Dad Man. Vivian replied before smacking Void on his back, which sent him tilting and going down the mountain slide. Ugh, scrap! He shouted while deploying his mask and having both T and Vivian kick off behind him. Running up to the ledge, the fallen Void didn't bother to hesitate and or stop. With one pulse, he ignited himself into a lunge, kicked off the snow's crested top, and landed upon the steep mountain side. At landfall, he only rolled for a moment before returning to a full-on sprint down its rugged ledge, with both his legs and sometimes his hands, creating a bizarre sight for the 3 Voids. Boys, looks like King Kong is a bit more determined than you've let on. Vivian shouted with slight panic as she and the 2 other Voids swerved around trees and sharp rocks. Behind them, the larger Void leapt and slid before opening his chest and unleashing several rockets out, all glowing with the same purple essence as the bomb. Heads up! T then replied as he reached down and took his board, proceeding to launch himself up into the air and flipping over several of the rockets to both Vivian and Void's shock. Summoning a pink Nova Rune that was in the shape of 6 triangles, Vivian quickly ignited and threw the magic spell out at the rockets behind her path, destroying a few, but leaving one that just nearly struck her down. As for Void, he awkwardly swerved from both his left and right, avoiding the detonating rockets behind himself that threw up both ice and snow in his masked face. Landing beside him in a chuckling manner, T turned the smirk upon the enemy Void and looked akin to a bear sprinting down the mountainside on all 4s. Reappearing as well, Vivian looked to her counterparts before stating something aloud. I have another idea, but once it's done, we gotta quickly lean ahead. The female spark revealed as she charged her frostbite blaster to light. That being? Void asked with a twinge of fear to his eyes as he then drifted around a fallen over log. Turning herself around, Vivian charged a blast up that appeared as a condensed ball that suddenly got larger, growing bigger than a basketball, and then to the size of a large tire. Upon its release, the orb of energy went whizzing through the air until suddenly smashing into the mountainside upon impact. This strike instantly caused a shift into the Earth's plates, along with the stable nature they all slid upon. Avalanche, was all Vivian replied with, as the mountain snow suddenly began to crumble. Batira's might! Void exclaimed in horror to the destruction Vivian had unleashed. Within mere seconds, a tidal wave of snow and debris quickly began to grow and descend upon them all, falling rather faster than the Voids would have liked. Leaning forwards, the three of them now using their upper body strength, did their best to stay ahead, all while hell broke loose from behind. Within moments, the fallen Void was engulfed into the snow and rubble that crashed and smacked back down right behind the three escapees. With one swift splash of frost, T was sent flying off his board in a violent way. As he went up into the air, he instantly turtled into his own mechanical body, looking to transform into an air fryer to Void's and Vivian's shock. Before they could ask, Void was swiftly flung off his board by the crashing ice and sent flipping through the air with widened eyes. Taking hold of her board, Vivian leapt up in a sideways angle and turned to see if her variants were okay. Yet within the chaos, as the two Voids were flying through the air, the third and more monstrous one leapt forwards through the nature-brewed storm, having one large claw outstretched, heading right for Vivian's form mid-air. As her mist-colored eyes locked with the monster's singular purple stare, the world felt to slow down to a freezing stop. Void, upside down, chest first, watched with widened, bulging eyes, while T just stared through a little visor in the air fryer's timer screen. Both watching, as Vivian was suddenly taken hold by the monster's massive hand. Once this happened, all suddenly crashed back into the ground, being engulfed within an eruption of freezing snow. Crashing and rolling over one another, Vivian and the Shadow smashed and sprawled across the crumbling snow in a violent display. They both slammed into the ground, bounced up, and crashed back down with such force that small chunks of their metal exteriors chipped away. Ugh! Get off me! Vivian barked as she thrusted her right hand over and smashed it against the fallen Void's face. Grunting in pain, the monster let go of Vivian, which left the two of them going off and sliding in different directions. Snapping her head around, Vivian quickly took notice of the next ledge ahead, one that looked to have been a straight drop-off. Gasping and activating her sword, she quickly raised it up and slashed it into the frosted tundra. Shards of ice and snow spilled from this impact, slowing Vivian all the way down before she went over the ledge. However, when all seemed safe, the large figure reappeared to her right and delivered a mind-numbing kick to her face. Losing breath, Vivian went flying through the air like a spiraling bird, arms flailing and cloak ripping away from the sheer force given. When slamming back down, she hit her head so hard that the visor around her face cracked at its right side. Wheezing and in need of breath, she quickly retracted her helmet and laid stomach first upon the snow, hacking and gasping for some form of stress release.
The power of cosmic frost coursing through your veins. Curious. Very curious. It will be all the worthy extracting it. Yes.
The monster zombily stated as he began to march his way forwards towards the injured Vivian, who tried to stand back to her feet. With heavy steps, the fallen Void appeared and activated his mirror space blade with a sharp ignition. Without saying another word and cutting right to the goal, the monster reared back and prepared to stab Vivian right through her forehead. Yet, before the act could be done, the monster shouted with a lurch backwards. With surprised eyes, Vivian watched as her evil counterpart whirled within the snow, snapping his arms and swaying his head from both sides, all while hacking and roaring in some kind of pained rage. Vivian! Void shouted with worry as both him and T ran to her aid, but stopped upon seeing the bizarre sight taking place in front of them. Jerking himself from left to right, the Shadow slowly inched his way closer and closer to the cliff's ledge, until suddenly collapsing upon one knee with his head hung low. Looking back up, the monster gazed upon the three Voids, but instead of glaring with a shiny purple eye, he now looked with two glowing green ones instead, ones that held a terrifying and pleading expression.
Kill me.
The monster boasted in a raspy voice.
Kill me!
He called again, as his eyes suddenly flickered between the two greens and its haunting, singular purple glare.
Please!
Shout again, while smashing both fists into the ground. What in Matira's name? Void asked, as the three watched the monster recoil and spasm, looking as though it were having a deadly seizure. Wincing, Vivian heaved its demands, and was more than willing to give it what it wanted. Snarling and charging her frostbiter up, she pushed herself upright within the snow, and unleashed its blast towards the reflection, to both Void and T's sudden surprise. Within moments, the shadow was encased within a bright pink layer of cosmic frost that halted his movements into an upright, reaching position. After stopping entirely, the large force, being dragged down by its newly added weight, tilted backwards, and simply went over the ledge, falling all the way down to the cliff's bottom, wherever that may have been. No sounds of crashing, shattering, or anything like that was heard. All that was left was the gentle breeze of the howling wind. Well, guess that's it for him then. T broke the awkward victory silence while taking off his cap and waving the snow off of it. Vivian! Vivian! Void then exclaimed with shock as he broke free from his confused trance. Running to her laying down form, the blue-crested spark knelt and held out his hand for hers. Are you alright? Taking a breath, Vivian weakly reached her right hand up and lashed it around Void's, allowing for the spark to hoist her back to a kneeling position. I am now, she replied, while leaning her forehead downwards in order to breathe properly once again. Sighing with a sense of relief, Void leaned his forehead down and pressed it against Vivian's, proceeding to then rub it back and forth in the way all sparks had done back in the day. It was just their way of showing thankfulness and care for one of their own. Hence why Void did it so frequently with those he cared about most. Opening her eyes wide, Vivian felt a tad shocked to feel such a comforting sensation after so long, a nostalgic one at that. But it's one she couldn't knock away. It was as though a long-lost brother had embraced her soul. In a way, that was most certainly the truth to an odd extent. Hey! Hey, systems are back online! Looks like we can go roundabout to the portal now. T exclaimed with a happy tone that Void and Vivian positively turned towards. Awesome. But, I think we need a breather before leaping to a new world. Just 3 minutes. Void suggested, as both him and Vivian sat back upon the snow. Agreed. Gotta say, that was some mighty teamwork we pulled off back there. I think I could honestly get used to this. I've always wanted younger siblings. T stated back as he too sat down. Honestly? Yeah. We should think of a name. Void replied with a smile, as Vivian's face dropped back to an annoyed expression. No. No names. She stated, but the boys were already going off with ideas. How about the rambunctious blues? She suggested. Nah, Vivian's purple, Void replied. It's just a different shade of blue, though. It works. T snapped back with a grin. Dude, by that logic, all colors are the same shade of blue. Vivian replied with a dumbfounded expression. How about we just don't have a name? We're not a band. Vivian then added, leaving Void to perk up. Oh, I got one. Since we gotta find at least one more of us, how about Orbasalt? He suggested, the T's immediate laughter. What? No! We're not calling ourselves... Vivian boasted, then groaned as her two variants found the name hilarious. I'm already regretting this. She added, while silently laughing deep within her soul. Down below, thousands of feet from the cliff's edge, a lone and curious Wendigo approached the shattered apart body of the fallen Void. having broken apart into hundreds of pieces upon landfall. His legs were separated, arms cracked into several pieces, head detached while the torso sat motionless. Approaching, the frail monster knelt down to the Matterbird's shattered arm that now rested palm up towards the sky. Believing it to be flesh and bone, the cryptid opened its razor-tooth-filled jaw and went in for a bite. But within a flash, the limb suddenly transformed into a blaster and shot the creature down, right through its crystallized heart. As one monster fell, another began to rise. Coming to life, all of the fallen void's dismembered body parts began to either roll or crawl into a collective group, looking akin to something someone would see in a body horror film. Like a twisted version of Frankenstein's monster, dark matter strands slithered out from the shattered limbs and began to reassemble the monster's form, all while the heartbeat within its chest began to boom at a violent volume. After a few bone-twisting snaps and locks, the shadow had returned back to its full form, now looked to the world with his mask off.
So close, Matterbirth. Oh, so close.
He said with a smile, growing excited as to how challenging this hunt was becoming. The monster needed the feed. That was the goal. But he couldn't deny, this change-up had been very, very interesting. Deploying his mirror space blade, he cut a rift open, and just like before, left without a second word, returning back to his maul to track, locate, and try again upon his now 3 powerful targets.